Good evening and thank you for joining us. The new coronavirus has reached a grim milestone. A 44-year-old man in the Philippines has become the first death outside of China. The death toll in China, the epicenter of the outbreak, is now over 350. More than 16,000 people have become infected. Hundreds of Canadians remain stranded in the country. The Canadian government has chartered a plane that is on standby to get them home. Ottawa insists it is waiting for the Chinese government to give it authorization to land. Once that happens, the plane will head to Canadian Forces Base Trenton, where the evacuees will undergo health screenings. The crew and Canadians returning will then be quarantined at the base for 14 days. But as Abigail Beeman explains, there's a lot of confusion among permanent residents.
We really want to go home. Canada is our home.
Bin Jung's two young kids are Canadian citizens. He and his wife, permanent residents. Canada says China won't let permanent residents on the Canadian evacuation flight, but Chinese officials told him they have no such policy. Now he has no idea whether his family of four will be allowed to board.
It's frustrating to say the least. But again, we are all hopeful.
We expected more communications from them. So even if it's just to say, hey guys, just letting you know that we know that you're in China, we're there for you, and we're working on something.
A crew is trained and ready to go. We're waiting for manifest to know which passengers are on that plane, and we're waiting for permission from the Chinese government. We've offered to help China with medical supplies. We're doing everything we should do, but we're also not panicking.
While the government still can't say when the flight will leave, Global News has obtained this email sent to Canadians in Hubei. It tells people to submit personal information to Global Affairs by Monday and says they'll try to provide 24 hours notice before the flight. But it also says space is limited and may not be guaranteed. The latest numbers show 325 people want to get out. There could be more passengers than seats on the one flight in the works. Global Affairs says it will keep working to get Canadians out.
I actually prefer to stay in Wuhan with my parents.
Felicity Fang runs a restaurant with her husband in Montreal, but is visiting her parents in her hometown, Wuhan. Her father is helping build one of two new hospitals for coronavirus patients. He's one of the few people outside all day and allowed to drive.
My whole life, I've never seen Wuhan like this. It's kind of scary. It's very, very quiet. I feels like living in a scary movie.
Scary, too, for those waiting for information from Ottawa about getting out, with so many unanswered questions about who can board the plane and what will happen when it lands back in Canada. The email from Global Affairs says only one carry-on bag allowed per person. One family tells me their bags are packed, ready to leave at a moment's notice. Robin?
Abigail Beeman in Ottawa. Citizens from more than half a dozen other countries have been able to get out of China thanks to their governments. Today, more than 100 Australians in Wuhan boarded a flight that will take them to Christmas Island, where they'll spend the next 2 weeks in quarantine. And tonight, there are reports 6 Chinese officials have been fired for how they handled the outbreak. Ross Lord reports.
More than 200 Indonesian nationals arrive home after being moved out of China, mostly from Hubei province. Their next move being flown to another location, away from residential neighborhoods. This police official hopes placing them in quarantine will run smoothly. A growing number of countries are moving their citizens to safety, something Canadian officials have signaled they are ready to do.
The government has secured a chartered aircraft and is now working on the diplomatic front with officials in China to obtain the authorizations to proceed with an assisted departure. This latest crisis is occurring after a long period of instability in Hong Kong and, as you are well aware, a difficult year in Canada-China relations.
But hundreds of Canadians are still in limbo. The Philippines, meantime, has a dubious distinction. A 44-year-old Chinese man developed severe pneumonia and died.
This is the first reported death outside China. However, we need to take into mind that this is not a locally acquired case. This patient came from the epicenter of this outbreak, Wuhan, China.
The Philippines has blocked entry to travelers from China. New Zealand, Iraq, and Indonesia are also imposing new restrictions. Health authorities in Canada suggest the risk of individual infections is relatively low, urging people to practice good hygiene just in case. But inside China, authorities have fired 6 officials in Hubei province for handling the outbreak poorly. A New York Times report claims the government put secrecy and order ahead of confronting the coronavirus to keep the public from panicking and to avoid political embarrassment. The number of confirmed cases could keep growing because thousands of specimens from suspected cases have yet to be tested. A long way to go before this public health crisis goes away. Ross Lord, Global News.